Cry It Out Loud, a podcast by Chasing the Rainbows with your host, Bernice Quisenberry.
This week's episode is called Safer Childbirth Out Loud. And today we are interviewing Gina Mundy, who is an attorney specializing in childbirth cases for the last 20 years and best-selling author of the book, A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth, and a mother of 3 children. Welcome, Gina. Thank you.
Bernice, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. We just had an amazing pre-show conversation. I love what you are doing. You are so amazing. So I'm really looking forward to today.
Oh, thanks so much, Gina. Yeah, we can't thank you enough for being on here, for our survivors and listeners tuning in to hear this segment and what you've been doing in our community for us. So will you share a little bit more about yourself and your story for our listeners and survivors to hear?
Oh, absolutely. So I am a mom of 3. I have a 19-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, and then my little son. He's 9. I guess he's not little anymore. And I've been married 21 years. And I also am an attorney, and I've been an attorney I've been an attorney for 22 years. But I've been an attorney specializing in childbirth cases since February 2003. So we're at 21 years that I have done this. But I basically was looking for my first job at a law school and stumbled on this because this is a profession that they don't teach you about in law school that I knew nothing about. And I was hired in to a team of over 20 attorneys. And this is all we did were the childbirth cases. Well, as I had just gotten married and having a baby was on my radar, I wanted to keep in this job and, pretty much make sure that, what I was seeing in these cases, didn't happen, during the birth of my kids. And then just so your audience understands, because there are a lot of people who really don't understand what I do exactly, but
Right.
basically in these cases that I handle, during the birth of a baby, something goes wrong and baby is not born healthy, or baby may pass away, or in some cases, mom has passed away. So as the attorney on the case, I come in and I find out what went wrong, why, and what should have been done. So baby would have been born healthy or mom born alive. And those questions have taken me all over the United States many times, meeting with delivery teams, hashing out every aspect of labor and delivery. So 19 years into my career, my niece, she was expecting her first baby, and she was the first baby of our next generation, my daughter's first grandchild. And during the birth of her baby, basically I got a phone call from my sister. I was about 1,100 miles away from the hospital that day. And I got a call from my sister, and she was just hysterically crying. And she was like, the baby crashed. And we went about 20 minutes, not knowing what was gonna happen. And, just being an attorney in these cases, at first I was in this legal analysis of, what she had gone through. And then as I listened to my sister cry, I went from this legal analysis to this, human analysis, and remembering all the families from my cases, because all the families always talk about this transitional period, life before baby, life after baby. And it's just, they've always talked to me about it. And then to hear my sister and wondering, is she going through this? And it was so heart-wrenching. It was just but it stopped me in my tracks. And we did get news that the baby was going to be okay. She did land on the right. I called to land on the right side of a close call. But that moment, I couldn't shake it. It was March 17th, 2021. And I started to think, well, what if I'm not around for the birth of my grandkids? Because what I have seen as a childbirth attorney, how I would prepare my kids for childbirth is probably completely different than how a normal, family would, prepare for childbirth. So I started to write down what I'd seen in my cases, lessons that we can learn. It's a lesson you're learning from the past to help prevent it from happening in the future. In my cases, there are reoccurring issues, reoccurring facts that families, if they know, they could have a heightened sense of awareness. It'll help activate their intuition to make sure these things don't happen to them, because there's not much that has changed since February 2003, in terms of my cases. So as I wrote this stuff down initially for my kids, I realized this is information that could help families, all across the world. And my book has sold my reviews. I have reviews in so many countries around the world on my book. So they're reading it and it's out there, and it's helping families have healthy babies. So to conclude, basically, instead of getting involved in the aftermath of something going wrong, I'm trying to get involved before childbirth, in hopes of preventing these mistakes and complications that I've seen for, almost 21 years now.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Gina. And you're so right. It is that educating to advocate for ourselves as, we go into bearing children, all of those things. But like you said, from that proactive standpoint, I feel like if we can be somebody's survival guide, or whatever prior to them experiencing a loss or hearing what you're having to say, that they can go in with a more educated side to things. And like you said, be able to advocate for themselves. Yeah.
That's so important. That's lesson one from these cases. And then when I go through the lessons from the cases, these are lessons from the delivery team, the families, the medical experts that come into these cases. But by far, the number one lesson is preparing and learning about childbirth, because ultimately, mom, is the decision maker.
Right.
You make the decisions. Doctors and your delivery team are simply giving you recommendations. So,
Right.
and like in anything in life, you're going to make better decisions if you're educated. And
Yeah.
one of the hardest parts about my cases, the families are just they're so close to a healthy baby. It's one decision, it's minutes from a healthy baby. So the importance of good decision making during childbirth, I cannot emphasize enough.
And it's going into that situation, because when you're in the midst of it, right, and you're in active labor, you're in the hospital, whatever it looks like, it is really hard to think clearly in those moments. And that's why it is like so important to go in with, a birth plan and different things that, like, if this happens, and then your partner, whoever you have by your side, can advocate for you if you can't in that moment, because you can't think clearly, from the pain and everything that you're experiencing, the whirlwind that's happening around you.
Oh my goodness. You could not have said that better.
Oh,
So no,
thanks.
I have a chapter on the birth plan. My spin on it as a childbirth attorney is different. It's the act of preparing the plan. That's the point of the plan. It's
Mm,
getting ready, because when you do go into active labor, you enter a different state of mind.
yes.
Somebody called it the labor bubble the other day. And I'm like, sure, that's great. I may steal
Yeah.
labor bubble.
Yeah.
But think about it. It's the only time it's totally cool to be in a bunch of pain,
Yeah.
because you're having contractions. It's acceptable to have, be in this pain. If you don't want the pain, then you're going to get, some type of medication that may alter your
Right.
mind. I actually had a doctor testify, and I included this in the book, that mom should really be given all of her decisions about childbirth before she goes into labor, because she does enter, that different state of mind. But
Yes.
then, yeah, then the next chapter is literally the baby advocate. I go over having an advocate, having
Yes.
somebody there so you as mom can relax.
Yes.
Stick your husband on it. Your
I know.
husband, their intuition and instinct is to protect their wife and their baby. And my book will help them do that. It will
Oh,
help them bring mom and baby home healthy and safely. So, and I get it. I just don't think there's been anything out there that will kind of show husbands how to do this. But,
yes.
my book does. And you know what? Guess who else is the best advocate ever? Grandmas, expecting grandmas.
Yes.
And you know what? It makes sense, because I wrote this book to have healthy grandkids. So, because I keep getting grandmas reaching out, grandmas are like, oh, yeah, I am on this, Gina.
Yeah,
And we do. We want to protect our children and we want to
right.
protect our grandchildren.
Yeah, seeing your child have a child, and it's exactly right, and it's like if
Mhm.
your husband's not equipped to handle or step up to the plate in this high stress situation because you know that about them, well, then bring in, your mom or somebody else that can, and it's so true, but
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
this leads into our first question though, what, parents must know to help them have a healthy baby? What are some of those points in your book that you feel are the most important?
Okay, that's a super loaded
I
question.
know,
So
right?
I
I
am
set
going
you
to
up.
keep that.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep it. So we did lessons already.
Yep.
So chapter 1, just so your audience understands, are all of the lessons from the baby cases. And then each lesson is a subsequent chapter. So
Okay.
I'm like lesson number 1, learn about childbirth. Be ready to make those important decisions. The next chapter is, okay, this is what you need to know to make good decisions. As an attorney specializing in childbirth cases, this is what I know when I'm looking at a case and going, is this good care or bad care?
Right.
Again, and that all comes down to decisions. So it's very important. And this is different information you're not going to find in a pregnancy book. And then
Right.
understand that your delivery team, they are responsible for bringing your baby safely into this world. It is, in my cases, it is their care that is at issue and analyzed more than any other aspect of the case. Having an understanding of your delivery team and their role, and understanding that if you don't like someone on your delivery team, feel free to switch them out. You don't
Right.
have to, if you don't like your nurse, you can get a new nurse. They're equipped to do that. So, and then your doctor, the next chapter, next lesson is how to pick the good doctor. I have analyzed OBGYNs for 21 years. It's a process when we analyze these doctors. You cannot stick a bad doctor in front of a jury. It's not going to fly. So there's so much that goes into, what we do when we look at how to pick a good one. And your doctor heads your delivery team.
Right.
And here's another important part. Unless your doctor's picking up a 12-hour shift, they're not going to be at the hospital. The head of your team is not even typically at the hospital. The people who are scheduled to work that day, everyone else on your delivery team, that's who's caring for you. So having that good doctor who has really good communication skills that, is in the trenches every day delivering babies. I mean, it's that stuff that's important. And I go through, I'm like, here's 20 questions to ask. This is what you need to do your own doctor analysis. This is mine. This is yours. And, I go through other parts. Having a great reputation does not equate to good care. So
Right.
the bunch of, yeah, and they've got some stories in there, doctor at trial, that's, kind of interesting and whatnot. So those 2 points are huge. And then another, it's just incredibly important chapter that, I continuously get asked, why is this information just coming out? And I continually give the same answer. I don't think a childbirth attorney ever thought to write a book, but chapter 11 is just so incredibly important. And those are the common mistakes and common issues in the cases. So if you know those, I think I just said this earlier, but you have a heightened sense of awareness. It'll help activate your intuition. Again, helping you to make those good decisions so you can, have a healthy baby, bring a baby that, is very healthy into the world. And at the same time, working with your delivery team.
Yeah.
Because, for instance, one of the most common issues and common facts in my cases, a busy labor and delivery unit, meaning eyes off the prize. They are running
Mm.
hard, and when they're running hard, they're thinned out. Think about it. I mean, just apply this to normal life. If you ever have one of those busy days and you start screwing everything, well, I shouldn't say this, but
Right.
you start screwing.
No,
I
right.
do. I do. So we're just gonna go with Gina, what Gina does.
Yeah.
I get slammed on some days and I tend to make more mistakes or I overlook things I shouldn't on those days. Same thing with the busy labor and delivery unit. Remember, babies come when they want to come, and they can overwhelm a unit pretty quick. So
Absolutely.
it's very important to have this understanding. So you're also working with your delivery team. When their eyes are off you, then you have your baby advocate, you have your husband, you have your grandma, your best friend, your aunt, whoever that may be, keeping an eye on you. I also am a huge fan of doulas. I
Yes, I was gonna say that right at the beginning when you were saying about having someone who advocates for the
Mhm.
baby and you in those it really is those doulas are yeah. Go
I
ahead, Gina.
am so I'll tell you, in my childbirth cases, I've never had a doula as a witness in a case. So if a mom even spoke to a doula during pregnancy or childbirth, if it's a childbirth case, that doula would be a fact witness. I've never had
Right.
one in my cases. And I know there's a lot of doulas out there.
Right.
And then somebody was telling me the other day, like there's even statistics now on, the chances of having a healthy or great outcome increases when you have a doula. And I, as a birth or a childbirth attorney, I agree 100% because they must be. Then I also know that a lot of doulas, I like the ones who especially work on educating their clients during pregnancy. They usually got some really great stuff that they're trying to tell you and trying to explain to you. And then not only that, we just talked about your delivery teams, the people who are scheduled to work that day. Well, if you have a birthing doula who can come in that day, who's been working with you, teaching you, building a relationship with you, it's going to be
Knows
another
you.
person that you trust.
Yes.
So, and again, when you have that, especially somebody who speaks the language of the delivery team, it's really going to help you relax so you can have a baby much easier. So I would probably start
Yeah.
with a lot of those.
Wow, Gina, thank you. And about the doulas too, the doulas are really there for you. It's not that you're doctors and they aren't, but who cuts their paychecks, right? It's the hospitals.
Mhm.
So at the end, sometimes like I know, survivors talk about this in support group and they feel like they're not getting all the answers. And it's not that they necessarily want the answers to even do anything about it. They just want it for peace of mind. And it's like to understand what exactly happened or and it's like you almost need to get a couple different experts or a set of eyes on, to really figure out and put the puzzle pieces together because it's really just that. But, when the doula is there, they're there for you, advocating for you, and
Mhm.
they are not stressed in that situation. They're fully level head, they're not emotionally attached, like your husband and you are, of course they care about you, but they're not, in that sense like you are, so yeah. I think you're right. I think you're spot on with that.
Thank you. Yes, I've learned a lot. I'm kind of sad because in my book, I don't really talk about doulas because I remember somebody even asked me, like, "Are you going to include doulas in your book?" And I'm like, "Well, I'll put something in there." And it's because I don't know anything. And then I published the book and I'm like, "Wait a minute, the childbirth attorney doesn't know anything about doulas." Ding, 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 ding. And since that point in time, I've learned so much about doulas, and there's such amazing doulas out there, and it's all makes sense.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks so much, Gina, for that standpoint too, and for you bringing that up. How so parents, right? So how parents can avoid the mistakes and complications in the birth of their baby. And so does that kind of segue into that with doulas and things like that too?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just knowing things again, that's like chapter 11 that could really help a family. For
Yeah.
instance, the number one most common fact and issue in a legal baby case, and this is in the majority of my cases, is the drug called Pitocin. Pitocin
Yes.
is used to induce mom's labor. And, it's almost like the cascade effect and whatnot. But so if you understand that, and then that's actually one of the lessons in and of itself. So, chapter 14 is how to have a safe Pitocin induction, because I have seen the Pitocin inductions gone wrong since, let's see, February 2003, when I got my first case. When I've traveled the United States, I've talked to all these delivery teams about this drug. I've researched this drug. I know the drug pamphlet. There were the drug insert, like the back of my hand. There's been extensive cross exams on Pitocin. So I took all of my experience and knowledge from my cases and I wrote chapter 14. So if somebody is undergoing a Pitocin induction, that is like a must read chapter, because when there are complications and there are mistakes, typically Pitocin is involved in that labor. So what else can we take from that? I have very, very few cases that involve a spontaneous vaginal birth or a natural birth, meaning no drugs, go all natural. Those are few and far between. So, it's just kind of learning about all this stuff, putting it together. Okay. And then another really important one, for instance, in chapter 11, when there's a mistake or a complication, typically, most of the time it is after mom's water breaks. So that is actually a very important decision. So if the baby is, doing okay and they're surrounded by their fluid, it's like they're still nice and comfy. And when you rupture their fluid and you take all the fluid out, it does, it just changes the baby's environment inside the uterus. And this is an environment, it's inside you. Your doctor can't look right into your uterus and assess it. So that's a very important question. But again, it's, if you read my book and you're doing your research and you're preparing a plan, you're going to have this just overall awareness and understanding, so you can make those good decisions. And I'm telling you, good decisions equal healthy baby.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting about the rupturing of the water breaking and things like that, because that does happen more times than not to keep things moving along, like you said, with the Pitocin and everything. And that was our first son, and them having to break my water and all that. And, I didn't,
Oh, wow.
you don't think about these things. Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
It's when I had to sit down and kind of take everything in my brain and put it on paper, especially after, we talked about pre-show, but after the first 3 months, was very difficult in writing the book. But after that, yes, taking everything and like, okay, what's important, what's not, and just getting it down. I mean, it took me 14 months and thousands of hours to write this book.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you, Gina. Yeah. And yeah. And, so why, is this new information just surfacing? I feel like it's things that I haven't even, heard or, discussed or learned, through this whole process or through other survivors and things like that. So I would love to hear your take on this.
As the attorney on these cases, I'm not a medical doctor or delivery, and it's someone on the delivery team. They get to see the good and the bad.
Right.
Me as the attorney on the cases, I only see the bad. And then these cases take years. So, and again, as I had said, these are reoccurring issues, reoccurring facts. But I just think ultimately, based upon what I've seen, that and other childbirth attorneys have seen, I mean, I just don't think before me, just anybody thought to write a book. I remember trying to Google like childbirth attorneys write book, whatever, just finding anybody who's written a book like this, and they haven't. So yeah, it's a very common question, but it's a very important question because hopefully, as I said, things are not changing. I'm getting the same cases I had in February 2003. So hopefully getting this information out there on what I have seen and whatnot, will help parents have a healthy baby.
Right. And it is crazy to think that the world that we live in now, right, in 2024, from 2003, when you started this journey, how nothing, your cases are staying the same and that the things are still happening, and they're playing out in the same way. It's like mind-boggling almost to think that.
It is. It's just really sad. And then I was just on a show this morning in New York, and I've been on a lot of shows, and
Right.
the host asked me a question I haven't been asked yet. and it's
Oh,
still like not sitting with me right, because I just,
okay.
again, as you know, as I get on and I talk to people and I realize things. But she says, like, currently, because I'm still practicing
All
attorney.
right.
But she said, she asked me, she's like, "Are the cases you're getting, I mean, is it more like babies that have passed away during childbirth, or babies that have an injury to their brain? Like, what are you really seeing?" And it just seems like lately, unfortunately, it's a lot of these cases are involving babies that have passed. So just
Oh,
understanding, I know, understanding this information, I just, as from what I've seen, and that's why I wanted to explain to your audience like what I do, because most people just, they don't even understand that we exist,
right.
and I always, used to say to people who have, I'm like, you never want to meet someone like me after you have a baby. Like
No.
but now I'm like, here you go. Here's some information so you never have to meet me.
Yeah. And that's how we feel too. We never want to have to service somebody because if we service them, that means that they went through a baby loss, or a
Mhm.
fertility loss. And it is heartbreaking, all of it. So you're so spot on, Gina, with that. Yeah. And if you're seeking out an attorney or, for a childbirth case, it's because you went through a birth trauma. It's, you went through trauma and grief. Um,
I can
so
tell you, I don't think I have to tell you this because I don't know how you do it, but losing a baby to a preventable mistake,
oh,
I just can't. It's very, as a mom, it's always just, it's hit hard. And again, that's another reason I wrote the book, to help other families, have a healthy baby so they don't have to endure what, the other families in the cases have.
absolutely. I know because, you feel as their parent, as their mother, you want to keep them safe, you want to keep them secure. And when that doesn't happen, for so many different reasons, right? That guilt, blame, and shame fuels your trauma from what you just been through. And it's hard to not think like, is there something I could have done more? And in some
Mhm.
cases there is. And, it's really hard to live with and accept those things, because realistically in the moment you were just trying to make the best decisions you could if you weren't prepared in this way. And I think that's why having you on here, educating our listeners, and then them also going to their support systems, their loved ones who, because we're in their friend circle, they're probably all around the same childbearing ages and things, so they can help one of their friends, or they can
Mhm.
mention this to them because it is so important. And that's really, I think, how looking at someone who's been through it or going to a peer that you respect, can really help with getting this out and making sure that this is preventable, and that these things aren't happening and they aren't seeking you, Gina, and they're not seeking me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. 100%. It's so incredibly hard when you sit down sometimes with the families, because, after something happens, they do a lot of research and they know so much more in
yes,
the aftermath of something going wrong, to the point where I know if they would have known this ahead of time, it may have helped them, still have their baby.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's hard to live with, but that's, why we do the daily support. So when those feelings
Mhm.
of being overwhelmed and, trying to process it and sit with it, being in a room with other survivors who get it because they're there with you, or they can at least see why you feel the way you feel, and just getting your
Mhm.
feelings out, not stuffing them, is so important. But yeah, anything proactively, to educate, to advocate is just, especially during childbirth, it is it's one of the most energy exhausting, well, it is the most energy exhausting thing that a human body can go through. But then on top of that, so many things can go wrong, complications can happen. And, being one of those statistics, as I am now, being part of the 25% of losing a baby, from pregnancy, it's like, okay,
Wow.
how can we do more? Yeah. So, well,
Wow.
thank
Yes.
you. Yeah. Oh, well, I just appreciate you being on here and sharing your book with us, sharing, your knowledge in the industry and all the families that, you've impacted over the years. It just means so much for you to come on and share with our survivors and listeners.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And again, I love what you're doing. So anything I can do to support you, just let me know.
Thank you, Gina. That means a lot. And thank you for tuning in, our listeners. And please follow or subscribe to our podcast to help us reach more survivors. If anybody would like Gina's information, please feel free to reach out to us either on our criedoutloudpodcast.com website or chasingtherainbows.org website. And we are always with you, fertility loss, pregnancy loss, and baby loss survivors. Until next time. Thanks so much, Gina.
Oh, thank you.